The story of Daniel in the lion's den is described in chapter 6 of the book of Daniel. It takes place in the 6th century BC when King Darius is reigning in Babylon, in current-day Iraq, and Darius rules a large empire in the Middle East. He has set up a system of subordinates who help him rule, and just below the king are 3 administrators, one of them being a Jewish man named Daniel. He's doing his job without fault, and the king considers putting him in charge of the whole kingdom. The other administrators hear about this and try to trick him. They ask the king to initiate a month-long decree that people cannot worship anybody else than the king. But Daniel keeps praying to his God and gets caught. The consequence? He has to be thrown into the lion's den, which basically means a certain death. The king really liked Daniel, and he tries to prevent Daniel from having to die there, but he has been set up properly and has no other choice than sending Daniel into the den. Before Daniel is thrown into the den, the king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." The biblical story then states, "A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed." There is some confusion about what the mouth of the den is. At first, it seems that this is probably not referred to the open area on the top of the den, and instead refers to a ground-level entrance through which people and animals could enter the den. So when talking about somebody being thrown into the lion's den, it usually means that they are pushed through the ground-level entrance and not thrown from the top down the rocks into the den. However, later in the story, the accusers of Daniel are thrown into the den, and it is written, "And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones." So, it allows for both interpretations. Anyway, it's interesting to see how different artists interpreted this. Around 1615, Peter Paul Rubens captured the den like a cave with an opening on the top. And, as in many other paintings, we cannot see the stone that has sealed the entrance. And this unknown Flemish colleague of Rubens imagines the den to be like a man-made structure, like a dungeon. And notice the crocodile hanging from the ceiling. It looks pretty bizarre. But I guess that the artist intended this to represent some of the normal food for the lions, and that it was temporarily raised because of Daniel's presence. In the beginning of the 20th century, the American artist Henry Ossawa Tanner also chose for a man-made dungeon, which looks more like some room inside the palace. But what I really enjoy about this painting is the contemplative mood of Daniel he captured, not only through his body language, but also through the soft blue lighting. The story continues as follows. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. And he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever! My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." In 1818, the British artist James Northcote captured the presence of the angel beautifully. And before I forget, I put a link to the full story of Daniel in the lion's den in the description box of this video. So Daniel survived, but interestingly, very few artists painted the aftermath of this story, even though it still involved the lions. But this engraving from the first half of the 17th century is an exception, showing what happened to Daniel's accusers and their family. The story ends as follows. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Notice how this engraving combines the presence of the families of the accusers and Daniel, who is the man at the center whom the lions do not touch. This painting from 1877 by an unknown artist combines several elements of Daniel's story, though perhaps not in the most realistic way. The whole story of Daniel in the lion's den is a pretty well-known one, but at the same time there has been very little secular evidence for the events in this story, beginning with the existence of King Darius. It is widely believed that the story is inspired by an older Babylonian folktale and that the contents of the story should be interpreted metaphorically. And these paintings on this tale have helped tremendously to convey the message of this story and make it come alive. One more thing before finishing. According to the chronology of the biblical book of Daniel, it can be deduced that Daniel must have been an old man by the time of these events, somewhere around 80 years old. So the iconic scene by Rubens, showing a youthful and muscular Daniel, is not very accurate. And for example, this painting from 1890 by Breton Rivière matches the biblical story more closely. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little overview of Daniel in the lion's den. If you did, please support the channel by hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and don't forget to click the notification bell if you haven't done so to be reminded when new videos are released. And if you miss any particular paintings about Daniel in the lion's den in this video, please leave them in the comment section down below. I'm always curious to learn about new art on this subject. Thanks for watching.